Gwendolyn Brooks by Joe Kelly and Nolan. Biography Part 1. Early Life. Gwendolyn Brooks was born in 1917 in Topeka, Kansas, but her family moved to Chicago shortly after her birth. Chicago's Bronzeville neighborhood was central to her upbringing and became the foundation of much of her writing. She grew up in a household that emphasized education and the arts, which encouraged her to develop her talents early. By the age of 13, she had already published her first poem and was on her way to becoming a literary powerhouse. Historical and cultural context. Brooks lived through transformative periods of American history, including the Great Depression and the Civil Rights Movement. Her poetry reflects the challenges and resilience of Black Americans, particularly in urban environments. She used her platform to explore themes like racial identity, social justice, and community. Brooks' talents was recognized on a national level, where she became the first African American to win the Pulitzer Prize in 1949 for her poetry collection Annie Allen. Biography Part 2. Literary influences. Brooks' poetry was deeply influenced by the Harlem Renaissance. She admired poets like Langston Hughes and Claude McKay for their ability to capture the Black experience. However, Brooks made these influences her own by blending traditional forms such as the sonnet with modern free verse styles. Her inspiration also came from her immediate surroundings. She drew on the rhythms of street language and the everyday lives of people in her community to create poems that felt both intimate and universal.
The poem which my group and I will be analyzing is To the Young Who Want to Die. This poem was written by Brooks and was published in 1987 as part of the collection The Near Johannesburg Boy and Other Poems. Brooks wrote this poem in dedication to the students at Gwendolyn Brooks Middle School. The poem reads, To the young who want to die. Sit down, inhale, exhale. The gun will wait, the lake will wait. The tall gall in the small seductive vial will wait, will wait. Will wait a week, will wait through April. You do not have to die this certain day. Death will abide, will pamper your postponement. I assure you death will wait. Death has a lot of time. Death can attend to you tomorrow or next week. Death is just down the street, is most obliging neighbor, can meet you any moment. You need not die today. Stay here through pout or pain or peskiness. Stay here. See what the news is going to be tomorrow. Graves grow no green that you can use. Remember, green's your color. You are spring. Speaker. The speaker of the poem is a wise, older mentor, guide, or guardian, which is addressing a young adolescent contemplating suicide. They show clear signs of compassion and empathy, as well as wisdom throughout the poem. The target audience of this poem is clearly middle schoolers, which are impressionable and have young minds that need to be heard and understood. The sit down, inhale, exhale represents a sense of extraction which middle schoolers often receive in class time. This could also be a guide to help the middle schooler understand, or the audience themselves contemplate and really think about what it is that they're doing. The speaker is also intervening and reassuring the audience that their feelings are valid, but that they should rethink about their decision and think about what's ahead. Setting and situation. The setting of this poem is not depicted, yet it paints a patient and understanding atmosphere. Many times, children do not reach out in fear that trusted adults will react in a certain way in response to their thoughts of suicide. And it is clear that the situation is of urgency, as the speaker is trying to persuade or as I mentioned, intervene the adolescent's suicide. The poem states, "Stay here through pout or pain or peskiness. Stay here, see what the news is going to be tomorrow. Graves grow no green that you can use." The speaker is instructing the audience that you do not get anything out of taking your own life other than simply resolving something in the moment. Rather, as if you wait, you can grow from the experiences that you have had and make something good out of them, which is what the following line is talking about. "Remember, green's your color, you are spring." This also signifies how young the audience is, because you are spring. Spring is new, flowers are blossoming, flowers are budding, something is coming into new. And it represents how these are young minds that are impressionable, and if you make a rash decision, you won't have the opportunity to see your life through. Theme. Although this poem explores themes of suicide, death and loss, health and illness, it does have an overall theme of resiliency in the face of despair. I argue this because the theme of the overall idea of the poem is basically the speaker telling the audience or the adolescent to be patient with their life and to understand that there's brighter futures and better times to come. This is really represented in the last stanza of the poem. Graves grow no green that you can use. Remember, green's your color. You are spring. It's basically telling the adolescent that they get nothing out of dying. Like, they can't do anything with that. But if they stay, they can do something with what's going to come in the future and what is new in their life and new experiences. And it also experiences these minoring themes of suicide, death and loss, and health and illness in the other parts of the poem. It's obvious they're talking about suicide and the gun will wait, the lake will wait, the tall gall and the small seductive vial will wait, will wait. These are often common forms of suicide. People shoot themselves, they drown themselves, they poison themselves or overdose on drugs. It also talks about death and loss. Death is very prominent in this poem. It's capitalized even in the middle of a sentence. And it's also repeated several times throughout the poem. It also talks about loss, graves, representing the person having passed as a remembrance. And it also talks about, very vaguely, health and illness, because it says, "Stay here through pout or pain or peskiness," basically saying, even if you're in pain, even if you're not doing well physically, like even if your health is bad, like there are still better times to look forward to. Like, miracles can happen, people get better, and these themes are all really important in the poem, and I think they're all equally evaluated. But I will say the overall theme does preside of resiliency in the face of despair.
So next we're going to talk about tone, and we're going to talk about the first line that kind of sets the tone originally, and this is sit down, inhale, exhale. This is a very calming tone to start off with. Brooks creates many tones throughout her work here, and the next tone that is created is the kind of persuasive and urgent tone, as she talks a lot about how death will wait, the gun will wait, the lake will wait, death will abide. She has a very urgent tone to this part of the poem, and she seems very desperate. The next, which is leading on to the next tone, and Brooks does a very good job of creating many tones to get her point across. Her message that suicide is never the answer comes up in many different ways, and the way she sets this sets these mini tones is by a lot of repetition and a lot of her word choice, which brings us to our next topic, and this is the word choice. The word choice is very selective. It's very direct and it's very simple. Again, we go back to the first line about how sit down, inhale, exhale. It's very simple words, and this is to make the entire poem very easy to comprehend, very easy to understand, as this is aimed towards an audience that has a lot going through their mind. They want to get this message in the most simple way possible, and I think Brooks does a very good job of doing so. And the words she uses are very compassionate, and it's very affectionate towards the audience. A lot of affirmation, and another thing she does is have a lot of repetition, repeating the idea that death will wait, as she does in Death Will Abide, and death is just down the street. She continues to repeat this in a way to reiterate the idea that suicide is never the answer. It's never the answer, and this is the meaning that she wants to get across to the audience. And she does this very well with the type of word choice she does. Next, we'll move on to the order. And like I said, with her word choice, it's very simple. It's a very simple order she does, and the first stanza is a good example of this, where it's a big stanza, very long stanza compared to the others, where it just continues to reiterate the same idea that death will abide, death will wait, death has a lot of time. And in this stanza, there are plenty of pauses and short sentences that kind of act as pauses in reading and pauses in writing. And this acts as a way to stop and think, stop and contemplate what you've read, and think about what's going through your mind as a reader. And that's exactly what she wants. She wants people to read this and realize what they're reading, and realize that what they might do to themselves is not the answer. And there's assurance at every point, which is, again, another way to reiterate the theme. And the theme is shown at the very end, where she talks about how green's your color and you are spring. This last stanza is a very short stanza compared to the very long first stanza, and it's a complete 180 on the tone and complete 180 on what she's talking about. And that brings us on to figurative language, is how the entire first stanza is pretty much all figurative language, and it's all personification, giving death its own personal trait. She creates a physical person almost with death, saying death will abide and death is just down the street. And this creates imagery, an image of your head of almost like the Grim Reaper. You think of death and you think of some sort of figure like the Grim Reaper. And in the line, death is just down the street, you can almost imagine him standing behind a light post or standing at the end of the street. And this imagery is also continued in the metaphor at the very end of the poem that says, remember, green's your color, you are spring. This metaphor saying how the audience is spring and how they're blooming, they're blossoming. It's a new beginning, and how they're bright and they're ready to flourish, just as spring is. And this is a complete different feeling than the first stanza, but this is a way to get her message across, and she does this in a very effective way using figurative language and imagery. To conclude, Brooks' writing style is very consistent. It's consistent in all of her work, and it's very evident in this poem. This poem is very concise. She gets her message across in a very direct way, and that's very, very effective for the audience. And you can tell that Brooks herself is very passionate about what she's writing about, and she's very passionate about the message. And she wants to create this theme that's universal, that is applying to an audience and a specific audience. And she does this by her word choice, her setting, and her word order. All of these things all create a theme that she wants to get across. And figurative language is another thing that she does very effectively. She uses very effectively. And in this example, she uses figurative language very well to get the point across that suicide is never the answer. And this is in a very important message. And she has a very urgent tone in her writing that reiterates this meaningful message. And again, this is a very important thing that everybody should learn from. Everybody can take this message away from this writing, and this is not only one of her most meaningful messages that she's ever written, but is one that is the most universal, and everybody can learn from it.